Hi, thanks for watching this episode of the Vital Point podcast. I wanted to give you some context just so you don't get confused. This episode was originally published on Instagram, and when I published it, the podcast was called One Question Wednesday. The reason for that being that I watched this amazing video with Gary Vee where he talked about if you want to do a podcast and you're just starting off, why don't you try a 90-second podcast? And I knew I wanted to talk about transformation, about integration, about breathwork and meditation and things that were a little bit heavier than 90 seconds. But I thought, what if we just keep it to one question? And so that's what I did. So two things came out of that. One, much shorter episode. So these videos are a lot shorter than some of the more recent episodes you may have been checking out on my channel. And two, I just wanted to get them out. You know, I was just learning about podcasting. I had another podcast that I had gotten the idea for, recorded 5 or 6 episodes, and then sat on them, not really being able to put them out for almost a year, you know, worrying about the editing, worrying about the distribution and the marketing and what to do. And so the idea with One Question Wednesday was to do the exact opposite of that. From the time that I saw the video from Gary Vee to posting the first episode with Ayahuasca Car was less than 2 hours. And so, you know, 60% became the new 100%. It is a little bit messy. It's, you know, that was my idea. I didn't want to get trapped in a cycle of perfection. Didn't want to get stuck. And I was just figuring things out, which worked out great. So wanted to get those episodes off of Instagram where they've been living and onto YouTube to get into a bigger audience and have all of the podcasts be under one umbrella. So if you haven't checked out the more recent videos, we're on season 6 now. Definitely subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of content on there. And this first season is really defined by not having any equipment. Season 1 ended when I realized I really needed a microphone, and I've got a nice one now. So season 1 was recording onto my phone, a couple of episodes on Zoom, and then not having a microphone. But the content is fantastic. The guests are fantastic, and there's some really valuable content about breathwork, about ayahuasca and psychedelic integration. And, you know, I think the content stands on its own. So I'm still really proud of it. I'm proud of the guests that I've had on this podcast, and I hope that you enjoy it too. If you're interested in learning more about psychedelic integration, coaching, breathwork, how to use breathwork to support, you know, connecting to your purpose, having a more resourced and regulated nervous system for working with psychedelics, I'd love to chat with you more about that. There's information below about how you can get a hold of me for that. And if you're not part of my newsletter, definitely click the link below to join. You'll get a free guide to using breathwork for integration to start with, as in addition to, you know, staying up to date with the breathwork circles that I'm holding, workshops, information about the podcast, all kinds of amazing stuff. So hope you enjoyed this video. Just wanted to give some context. So, you know, when you're watching it and it says One Question Wednesday, you're like, wait, I thought this podcast was called The Vital Point. It is The Vital Point, and the vital point is to practice, that you have to put these things into practice. But like I said in the beginning, when this was recorded, One Question Wednesday was what I was doing. So I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. So thank you so much for being a guest here on One Question Wednesday, the podcast where we ask our guests one burning question. So really happy to have Jamie Clements here as our guest for episode 2. If you guys don't know, Jamie is an incredible breathwork facilitator and coach. You're based out of London, right, Jamie?
That's right, yeah.
And I met Jamie the first time that I actually got on stage on Clubhouse. um, through our mutual friend Connie, Breathwork Alchemy, who's actually going to be the guest next week. And I've been following him ever since. He's a really incredible teacher, and I've just learned a lot from him about how to put myself out there as a breathwork facilitator. So really super excited that you're here with us today, James.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited and excited to see what this one question is.
All right. So the question for today's show is, why is Menswork so important, and how does breathwork specifically fit into your work with men?
It's a good one. It's a very good question. So yeah, I guess as a bit of background, like a lot of my work, so with breathwork and outside of breathwork, is focused around men's mental and emotional health. So yeah, what people might know as Menswork. And I think the reason that, I guess, two parts. Why is Menswork so important? I think the reason that Menswork is so vital is because I think we're only now just starting to come into this realization, this acknowledgement of the fact that the patriarchy, this sort of system that we've all operated in, has actually not only had a really negative impact on minorities and women and basically anybody non-male, but also on the male population as well, in terms of how we've all, most of us, unless we were lucky, sort of been raised in a society and a system where the norm for men, for male individuals, is this emotional repression, suppression, this emotional disconnection. And so we end up as young men and men into later life who not only don't know how to speak about their emotions, but also don't know even what they're feeling. And we've just built up this, I suppose, this mask, this guard. But on a deeper level, if we're thinking about the emotional body, our subconscious, the body consciousness, there's a huge amount of what I once heard Aubrey Marcus describe as like gunk, this buildup of gunk from pushing down our emotions to the point that we start to see not only physical ailments, but also mental and emotional issues. And so that's why I think there's so much value. There's Connie. Hey, Connie. There's so much value in Menswork in general. And then this is actually a very timely question, because last night I had the pleasure, the honor in a lot of ways, of holding a breathwork session for a friend of mine who runs men's groups, men's circles. And so I ran a session last night, and I said to the guys, I was like, this is really special for me, because naturally we see a lot more women being drawn to this kind of work, because it's, you know, emotional health, mental health, wellness, whatever you want to talk about it, still is much more female dominated in terms of practitioners and participants. And so to be in a space where it was just men was actually really different, but really special in its own way. So I ran this session last night, and it was just incredible to see, in a lot of cases, people coming to breathwork for the first time, and being able to have a really profound experience of clarity, of catharsis, of peace of mind, of whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I guess to go a little bit deeper into breathwork and why breathwork can be such a big, I guess, big and important and impactful part of Menswork is, I guess, alluding something I alluded to a little bit earlier around this sort of emotional disconnection that we as men can have. And I suppose the power of breathwork, among a lot of other benefits, but the power of deeper breathwork is really peeling back the layers of the onion, getting rid of that mask, turning off the monkey mind, the ego, and getting into what is held in the body. And so if we've spent a lot of time in our lives pushing down our emotions, cutting ourselves off from them, breathwork gives us the opportunity to clear and process that emotional charge, that emotional energy that we hold in our bodies. And the other benefit, I suppose, of men specifically doing this kind of work is it's non-verbal in a lot of ways. Obviously, you know, working with a facilitator, you have the opportunity to verbalize, to integrate, which is a hugely important part. You know, I saw the first episode of this talking all about integration, and integration is one of, you know, the most important parts, if not the most important part of this kind of work. And so while there is the opportunity to verbalize, for some people it doesn't have to be a verbal experience. It doesn't have to be something that you overanalyze and talk too much about. It can just be a felt somatic experience that can be extremely transformative, extremely profound. So yeah, there's a lot to it, I think. Being in the space with the guys last night for that session really showed me the value of that. And I think getting in a group setting as well, as nice as it is to get back into that group in-person environment, holding that sort of space, also helps to heal a lot of, I suppose, disconnection between men as well. If you're sort of in that vulnerable space, that space where you have to allow yourself to sort of surrender and let go, it really does create a much deeper bond than we often see if you're, you know, in a bar or down the pub or playing football or whatever it might be. Like, those are great connections, but they're not emotional typically.
Yeah.
So we get a chance to go a little bit deeper when we can get men in that kind of space together. And that actually, for me, was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. Was about 3 years ago at a men's event when there was 120 men in a room, and we did a load of cold water therapy, and there was a panel talk, and then we did 90 minutes of conscious connected breathwork. And that, for me, was actually the day that I decided I wanted to become a breathwork facilitator. And so I can sort of speak firsthand to the power of that sort of shared experience for men, but also for everybody. You know, those experiences do span the binary and the beyond. So yeah, no, it's a great question.
Yeah, thank you for such a thoughtful answer. There's a lot there that really resonated to me. You know, that idea of like all the gunk that we accumulate on an emotional and kind of spiritual level from suppressing our emotions and not letting ourselves complete, right? Like not just shoving it down, walking it off, you know, however you want to call it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Breathwork is such a powerful transformational tool for like freeing ourselves from that gunk and just letting it come out and really complete. And then just I can also relate to the disconnection factor of it as well. You know, within the last couple of years, as I've, you know, kind of gone on this healing journey and discovered breath work and just really opened this new chapter of my life, I'm amazed at the quality of the relationships that I've made, especially with men, you know, just being in these vulnerable spaces together, as opposed to, you know, being in the pub or, you know, like you said, you know, playing sports, things like that, where we're sort of programmed to, you know, just have this sort of like macho masculinity. And, you know, the one experience that I've really had with, you know, Menswork is doing a plant medicine ceremony weekend with just men. And I really like walked into it just thinking, okay, this is just going to be another weekend. But the profundity of being seen, being heard, and also like seeing my space in the circle, you know, like having older men where I was like, wow, like these are the role models that I always wanted. And then also like seeing how I have a space. I'm not the youngest one in the room either. There was just this very wonderful connection and container that happens when you're just around men. And you're absolutely right. It was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing a Maston Kip workshop and on Zoom. And so there's like, you know, a couple hundred people in the room, and I put it on the gallery view, and I was like, wow, this is like 80% women here. You know, so I think you're absolutely right that that men can benefit from this arena, which calls a lot of women into it just from the nature of the work, and getting in touch with their feelings is just such an incredible gift that we can give to ourselves and then spread it out into, you know, our circles, within our families, within our relationships, and within our communities, and the work that we do. Just like you said, you know, like that's what a transformative experience that was, like the moment where you're like, okay, I got to do this. Like this is my purpose. This is my calling. So thank you so much for sharing that.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing your experiences as well, because it's so, there's so much power in shared experiences. You know, be that a conversation about experiences or having the experience together. There's so much depth to that. And I said, to touch on and build on that last point, I said to the guys in the session last night, I was like, I'm so grateful for all of you being here, because, you know, in a normal workshop, in a normal session, it would be 80-90% women in the space, when actually the people who could benefit the most from this kind of work, potentially it might be a sort of flipped inversion of the ratio to be like 90% men. I think if we're thinking about, you know, and we both know, but for anybody listening, like, we both know the vast potential of this work and the depths that it can go to for everybody. But I think especially just because of, as men, your experience more generally of growing up is one of man up and just be a man, be a guy, get on with it, disconnect, don't verbalize, but also don't feel your emotions. And so that buildup of gunk that we've talked about is even greater than it might be for somebody else. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit for guys, and I'm hoping to work more and more to bring more men into this work, because I'd like to think that, you know, I'm a pretty normal dude, and I hope that, like, a lot of guys can resonate with me as an individual to say, hey, okay, like, if this guy gets it and says it might work, then maybe it can work for me too. And I think that's how we get the most benefit and the most people engaged, is to get them saying, yeah, this might work for me too. And that sort of resonance between people to say, I like this guy, and what he's telling me sounds pretty interesting, so why not give it a go? And I think that's the first step so often with breathwork, is just to get someone in the room and get them curious to say, maybe I should give this a go.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So yeah, I know that the name of this show is One Question Wednesday, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I wondered if you wanted to expand on the question that Paul McNeil 70 asked. He said, any tips on how to get men to attend a men's circle or group session? Agree we can do so much here in getting men talking with vulnerability. So I think you mentioned a little bit of that in your last answer, but anything you wanted to add to that maybe?
It's not an easy question to answer. I think the natural desire or the natural impulse is to try and pull people into this work, or even actually push them into it and say, hey man, you've got to do this, like this is for you.
Right.
And as a friend, as a trusted, you know, acquaintance of that person, maybe you do have a good lens on whether something would be of benefit for somebody. But with breath work, with men's work, with more broadly mental and emotional work, doing the work is kind of that big banner. You can never, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So like you can only do so much. If you're forcing someone, and I remember Alan Dolan, who I trained with for my conscious connected breathwork training, he is actually really resistant to, you know, for example, a parent coming and saying, my child needs to do breathwork with you, or a partner saying, I've bought a session for my partner because I think it would benefit them. And it's like, that's not it, because
right,
there's a big element of like, you've got to want it. You've got to really feel like this is for you. And whether that comes from a place of just curiosity or whether it comes from a place of real strong knowing, it's got to be a personal decision. So I think the same applies here in the sense that we can't force anybody into it. However, all we can do, and I'd say the best thing to do, the best way to talk about it is just leading by example. And that doesn't have to be as a leader. And I think for me, I've never really viewed myself as a leader. That word gives me sort of resistance. But as an individual, we can all be leaders in the sense that everything you do may be seen and may be viewed by somebody else, and it may have an impact that you're not even aware of. So for me, like my podcast, the work I do with Breathwork, the conversations that I have with friends, it's never, you should try this. It's saying, this thing is great. I think it's really great. And if you think it's great too, come and speak to me. And so it's just getting the conversation as wide and as broad as possible so that it's in as many people's ears. So the likelihood of someone going, hey, yeah, you know what, I will give that a try, is higher. So it's not so much about saying, hey, you have to do this, or I bought you a ticket for this thing. It might be a nudge or a steer in the right direction, but never like a shove. So yeah, sort of that gentle, just it's all about leading by example, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful answer. I was thinking the exact same thing. Just the key to me is embodying, and just it shows up in the work that you do yourself, and the vibrations that you give off, the way that you carry yourself, and then people come to you and say, hey, you weren't like this last year or 10 years ago, or what are you doing, and then there's like this wonderful invitation of like, oh yeah, well, this is what I've been doing, if you want to come check it out, please. I think it would be great. So yeah, wonderful answer.
Yeah, it's my partner's favorite quote is the Gandhi quote, which I think sums it up quite nicely, like be the change that you want to see in the world. And I think that is the best way to put it is, and you're absolutely right. I think that's what's happened a lot for me, is people that I've known for 10, 15, 20 years have seen the changes in my life over the last 3-4 years, and they're like, huh, like what's going, like in a good way, like what's happened to you. So yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, is just keep doing what you do, and people will come to it in their own time, or they won't, and that's okay too.
Right. Absolutely. Well, awesome. This has been a great conversation. I feel like we could keep going for a lot longer, but I want to stick to the format of the show and honor your time as well. So Jamie, if people want to learn more about you, they can go to _breath_space on Instagram. Anywhere else they should check you out?
I think that's probably the best place. Like everything I do, everything I do is on there. I have a website, which is thebreathspace.co.uk. And there's a bit more information on there and ways to contact me, but the best place is probably Instagram. So if anybody wants to chat, then my messages are always open.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this great chat, Jamie. I really appreciate your time and for giving such thoughtful answers.
Thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure. Always love chatting.